Is there a kind of anger that feels completely justified? Not the kind you look back on and half regret, but the kind where this time I'm angry and I am not wrong. That feeling is dangerous because the moment you believe your anger has a point, you start allowing yourself to do things you normally wouldn't, say things you normally never would. The truly frightening thing isn't anger itself. It's believing your anger is justice. That is exactly how Achilles walked back onto the battlefield of Troy. We talked about this before. Hector killed Patroclus. Achilles fell to his knees, wept without restraint, and when the crying was done, he stood up. His mother, the sea goddess Thetis, understood her son's heart. She went through the night to Hephaestus, god of fire, and commissioned a new suit of armor for Achilles. That armor was the most exquisite, most powerful armor in all of mythology. Achilles put it on and walked back to the battlefield. In that moment, the Greeks who saw him cheered. The Trojans who saw him went weak in the knees, but Achilles looked at no one. His eyes were fixed on one person only. Hector. Hector was the greatest hero of Troy, the eldest son of the king, the man the entire city leaned on, a husband, a father. That day, he stood outside the city walls, waiting for Achilles. They fought one-on-one. There was never any doubt about the outcome. Achilles killed Hector. But the story didn't end there. Achilles tied a rope around Hector's ankles and dragged the body behind his chariot around the walls of Troy 3 times. On the walls above, Hector's father, old King Priam, watched. The old king's wife, Hector's mother, watched. The entire city watched. That was not war. That was humiliation. Let me ask you something. Achilles had already won. Hector was already dead. Why was that still not enough? There is a concept in psychology called dehumanization. It means when a person, through emotion or ideology, begins to reduce another human being from a person to a thing, an obstacle, a demon, a monster, an evil force. In that moment, he is no longer a person, and anything you do to him no longer requires moral permission. He has become nothing more than an outlet for your rage. The moment Patroclus died, Hector, in Achilles' eyes, was no longer a hero, no longer a person, no longer a father, no longer a son. He was only the demon who took away the most important person in my world. Once you define someone that way, what you can do to them has no limit. This isn't only a story from 3,000 years ago. Have you ever watched a public shaming unfold online? Maybe the person really did something wrong, but as the conversation grows more intense, that person slowly shifts from someone who made a mistake to something that must be destroyed. The comments grow harsher and harsher, not to make them reflect, but to make them disappear. Not to make them change, but to make them hurt. In the flood of comments, that person has already been dehumanized. Have you ever, in an argument with someone close, said something not to help them understand you, but deliberately aimed at their most vulnerable place and driven it in? In that moment, your goal was no longer to solve the problem. Your goal was to make them hurt more than you. In that moment, they were no longer entirely a person to you. They became your outlet for anger. Once a person is no longer seen as human, any cruelty becomes justifiable. Achilles killed Hector, dragged the body around the walls 3 times. He did the most humiliating thing within his power. And then, his best friend Patroclus did not come back to life. That emptiness was still empty. Neuroscience tells us revenge, in the moment of execution, triggers a dopamine release in the brain, which means revenge really does make you feel good. Briefly, genuinely, satisfyingly, but only for that moment. Because once the dopamine fades, what you lost is still lost. The wound you carry is still right there. Revenge cannot bring back what's gone, cannot erase the words that already cut, cannot restore what is already broken. All it gives you is that one split-second feeling of winning, and then nothing. Have you ever, after an argument, said something that genuinely hurt the other person? In that moment, you felt good. I won. And then, the connection grew more distant. The other person closed off. The problem was still the same problem. Because revenge can produce a feeling of victory, but it cannot bring anyone back. And then something happened that no one expected. The old king of Troy, Priam, the father who stood on the city walls watching his son's body being dragged in the distance, he went alone under cover of night into the Greek camp. He walked into Achilles' tent. He knelt before Achilles and said, "I kiss the hands that killed my son. I beg you, give him back to me. Let me give him a proper burial." In that moment, Achilles wept, not from rage, not from grief, but from something that only a human being can feel. Achilles looked at this old man and thought of his own father, also an old man, also waiting for a son who might never come home. In that moment, Hector, in Achilles' eyes, became a person again. Achilles returned Hector's body to old King Priam. He said, "Let the two of us, just for tonight, set our grief aside." He personally escorted the old king back to Troy. This is the most important scene in the entire Iliad. Not the most spectacular battle, not the most heroic sacrifice, but a man, at the moment he had the most right to be cruel, who chose to stop. Yes, to stop. He didn't become a better person. He was still the Achilles who raged, who walked away, who dragged a body behind a chariot. But in that one moment, he looked at the old man before him and saw a person. That was enough. A truly mature person is not someone who never gets angry. It's someone who, in the moment they most want revenge, can still stop and ask themselves, do I want to solve the problem right now, or do I just want to make them hurt? Let me ask you, the last time you said the most cutting thing in the middle of your emotions, were you truly trying to solve the problem, or were you just trying to make them hurt a little more than you? Wu Talks World. See you next time.